Hey guys, welcome back to another impressions video, this time around for Fire Emblem Fates Birthright for the Nintendo 3DS. A game that came out early this year, and I know I'm a little bit late to the party. I think a lot of the people that have bought this game have already played and beat this game. And in fact, a lot of the people that I know here on YouTube have already not only played and beat this game, but the other two that are part of the same package, which are Conquest, and I think Revelations is the name of the other piece of the game for this Fates Fire Emblem package. And yeah, so far I only have beaten Birthright. It took me a while, like I said, but decided to make this video nonetheless to throw in my 2 cents and give my impressions. So Fire Emblem, I was lucky enough to get the limited edition or whatever they called it, that came with the physical cartridge that includes all 3 games already in there. And I decided to start with Birthright because the last game that I played in the Fire Emblem universe was Awakening, and they both share a lot of similarities in terms of gameplay. So I decided, the transition will be smoother, and so I will play Birthright first, and then delve into Conquest, which is supposed to be a little bit more challenging, a little bit more of a old school Fire Emblem type of gameplay. So I decided to go with Birthright, and sure enough, the game does share a lot of similarities in terms of gameplay. But before we start the story, I'm not going to go too much into detail, but just to say that the story is perhaps, in my opinion, one of the weakest points in this particular Fire Emblem game, which is a little bit disappointing. And granted, I have to admit that I have only beaten Birthright, and I still have to play Conquest and Revelation. So maybe there are some other unfolding of events that make the story better, but so far Birthright only has a very cut and dry type of story where you play on the side of the good people, the kingdom of Hoshido, which is they have been in this everlasting battle throughout history with the kingdom of Nor. So it's basically 2 kingdoms going at each other, and basically it's very cut and dry. One represents the good the good guys, and the other one represents the bad guys, Nor and Hoshido. And so throughout the game you have that feeling all the way that you're playing for the good people, you're doing this for a good thing. And I get the feeling that for Conquest it'll be the exact same thing, except the opposite, where you're gonna play for the bad guys, and it's gonna be very, predictable and boring. Now there are some developments throughout the chapters. Some people that betray you, certain things that happen that make the story a little bit more interesting. But overall, I thought the story was pretty weak, unfortunately. So in that regard, that's a little bit disappointing. But the good news is that everything else in this game is absolutely fantastic, and no exceptions here. As far as strategy RPGs, the Fire Emblem series has been a staple for many years, and this game delivers another very solid experience that is very friendly to newcomers to the genre. So if you guys have not played any strategy RPGs, this is an excellent place to start because of the different options in terms of difficulty that the game offers. You can play the game on casual mode, which I do not recommend that, but in the casual mode, if your character dies, you get him back on the next battle. And there's an even easier mode, I believe, with this that I believe is new for these games right here, which is I believe it's called the Phoenix mode, in which if one of your character dies, it only takes like a couple turns and he's back in action. So if you have young ones or kids or whatever, and they're still trying to get their feet wet in this genre, maybe that's a way to go to teach them the very basics. And the game obviously is pretty easy because you don't ever lose your units. But for those of you that that are experienced Fire Emblem veterans in the series, sure enough, the classic mode is there, where if one of your character dies, he's gone for good. So as far as the gameplay, now a funny story about losing characters. I actually started the game, and I already explained I picked Birthright because I came from Awakening, which I absolutely loved. It's one of my favorite games on the 3DS. So I was hoping for an easier transition, and I got a little bit cocky. I started the game on normal difficulty, which is pretty straightforward. It's not difficult and it's not easy. It's just pretty straightforward. But after chapter 6, you play the story on Conquest and Birthright are basically the same up until chapter either 6 or 7, in which you have to make a decision, and you have to either you decide to either support the the kingdom of Hoshido or Nor. So that's when the game kind of branches and all the differences start kicking in. So I decided to obviously play Birthright, and a couple 3 or 4 chapters in after chapter 6 or 7. Man, I got cocky, and I'm not gonna lie, I lost a ton of units, like maybe 3 or 4 units. So I decided to clean slate, just reset everything and start from scratch because I don't know, I got cocky. I thought, yeah, I got this under control. These are the early chapters, and sure enough, the early chapters are pretty easy. It's just I wasn't even thinking. I was just trying to attack and advance and just send my units without any reasoning other than just to wipe out the enemies, and that did not work out for me, and I ended up losing 3 or 4 units, and I was like, man, this is not turning out to be so good. So I decided to restart the game, same difficulty, same same difficulty setting, and this time I was a little bit more careful. And sure enough, I stuck with my guns this time around, and I was a little bit more careful. And sure enough, I was able to beat the game, which, by the way, I think it took me around 30 hours to beat this game, which is something, from what I remember, I think a lot of people were saying this game is pretty short. It'll only take you like 20 hours, 22 hours. And I mean, I don't know how, but it took me 30 hours. I'm very careful with these games. As far as setting up your units before the battle, I spent a ton of time before the battle even begins, selecting my units and just positioning them even before the battle starts, just to have the most optimal attack range, and just putting the units that are stronger on certain sides of your original grid, and just making sure that you have the right units for the right types of enemies, because you have an overall look at the enemies of the map, and you can kind of strategize from that point on. So I do like to take my time into selecting the right units, selecting the right type of weapons, primary weapons to equip to your characters, and so forth. So yeah, it took me 30 plus hours to beat the campaign. And I think my 3DS activity log mentions that I played this game for like 36 hours, so maybe 6 hours of that was my first run when I decided to quit, and then the 30 remaining hours was for my second attempt at playing the game. So yeah, it takes, I guess, between 20 and 30 hours. I apparently some people are much faster, but I was very careful on my second playthrough because I don't like using units, and I like to have as perfect as a battle as possible. That's where the reward comes, in my opinion. And of course, as far as gameplay, I think this game is pretty similar to Awakening. There are some certain subtle differences. The cool news is that the weapons don't break anymore. They don't necessarily break, but that's a good thing. But there are other things, like for example, when you pair up a unit, I believe in Awakening, when you pair up 2 characters, they both attack if you attack an enemy. Whereas in Fire Emblem Birthright, when you pair up 2 units, the second unit doesn't attack. He's just there kind of like to protect you based on the bond that you have with that character. He may provide you plus speed or plus dodge abilities, but he doesn't necessarily attack. The way to attack now with 2 units is that you have to have 2 units standing right next to each other. So there are subtle differences in terms of gameplay to make this different from Awakening in certain points. So that's pretty nice. It's not just a copy and paste formula from Awakening, which it would have worked in my opinion, but being a new game, it's nice to know that there are subtle differences in terms of gameplay, which make things a little bit more interesting and adds variation to the gameplay. As far as other gameplay features that the game offers, you have this hub world before each battle, where you can equip your castle with different things, like to improve your troops being stronger and things like that. And all of those things are related to basically Street Pass, where you can invade other people's castles, or people can invade you and you have to defend your castle from the attack of other people. Pretty nifty features that I personally did not spend a whole lot of time exploring, unfortunately, but my main focus when I play these games obviously are always the main story, not even the side stories. I believe this game has what are called challenges, which is something that it's not present on the Conquest game, and these challenges are kind of like side missions where they allow you to grind for experience and for more points or whatever. Personally, I only did a few of them, not all of them, but if you want to level up some characters, or if you're feeling like weak or something, you can always grind before each main mission, and that way you level up your characters. So that, in that regard, that's why people keep saying that Birthright is perhaps the easiest one of the three here in this package, because it allows you to grind a little bit of points and experience in order to tackle the main missions. And I haven't played Conquest yet, but from what I understand, that's not present in Conquest. So that's a major difference between the two. Also, another cool thing about Birthright is I noticed there were some newer classes as far as the type of characters you can pick and the type of classes, obviously. So that added another depth of another layer of variety in terms of gameplay. And of course, as usual, each Fire Emblem game has a main overpowered character. This time around, he's not a Cavalier or a Paladin like in previous games. I believe Frederick was the main culprit in Fire Emblem Awakening. This time around, I think his name was Ryoma. He leads the Hoshido army, and this guy is absolutely insane. Once you get him in your party, this guy is so overpowered that even units that have an advantage, because the Fire Emblem games, they're based on the rock, paper, scissors type of system with the blue, red, and green triangle, which is a little bit different compared to other games, which is another variety in terms of gameplay. But even the characters that have an advantage over these, I think his name was Ryoma, if I remember correctly, he still destroys everybody. So as long as you're careful and you keep a healer kind of close to him to heal his wounds after battling a couple of enemies, he will destroy absolutely like any enemies. And I'm kind of scared now, because now that I'm going to play Conquest, you have to face the Hoshido army, and I know Ryoma is going to be there, so I have no clue how I'm going to defeat him. But I'm sure in the Conquest side, you're also going to get some kind of overpowered character that will do the trick. So, but that's later for me. Surprisingly, a lot of the people that bought these games, they already did their impressions videos, and they play back after back after back. I can't do that, guys. I'm gonna take a break from the Fire Emblem series. I already bit Birthright, and I'm gonna tackle Conquest sometime next year. No rush at all. No point in playing them back to back. I really don't know what the rush would be. Quite the opposite. These are very good games that I want the experience to last. So I'll probably try to tackle other RPGs, other genres of RPGs. Keep my mind a little bit away from strategy, and then come back and play Fire Emblem Conquest, obviously. And then when I have the time after I beat Conquest, I will go for Revelations to get the full scoop on the story that again seems to be very simple so far. It's just the good versus evil, and that's about it. But again, as far as gameplay, this game, that's where it shines, and Fire Emblem just offers a fantastic terms of gameplay, which I did not take full advantage of the gameplay, by the way, because I know you can still get married, your characters married to one another and have kids and stuff. I developed a good bond with a couple of characters, and my relationship level, I think I've obtained level A, I believe, but in order to have like kids or something, you have to get level S or something. I wasn't quite able to do that. I was able to do that in the previous game in Awakening with two couples, I guess, but not in this game, which is I thought it was odd, but it was just a natural way that I played the game. I was able to get a lot of bonding between a lot of pairs of or couples in the game, but not to the point that I was able to get to have kids basically. So I guess I kind of missed out on that, but at the same time, I did find well enough to beat the game, which the later chapters, I have to admit, are much better than the early ones, and that's one of the reasons why it took me a while to beat this game. I was not very excited as far as the early chapters in the game. There wasn't a whole lot happening as far as the story, in terms of the character development. There was just nothing very interesting, but the later chapters get more interesting. And that's kind of when I just plow through chapter after chapter, in the later part of the game. So if you guys are not feeling it in the early part of the game, stick with it. I can guarantee you that the later chapters are much better and much more challenging. Obviously, even though I only played this game on normal, which is, it's not supposed to be hard at all. I was having some issues. I had to be extremely careful in a couple of the later missions in the game, where you just get ambushed. You have troops attacking you from all sides, and you have troops that regenerate, or enemies that regenerate, and so forth. But overall, guys, Fire Emblem Fates Birthright is a fantastic strategy RPG, a must-have if you enjoy the genre, and a must-have if you enjoy the Fire Emblem games, obviously. Unfortunately, the story did not do a whole lot for me, but again, I still have to play Conquest and Revelations, and maybe once you play all 3 games, maybe something will click, and maybe the story will make more sense at that point. But for now, that's it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all later.